Hello, in this video I'd like to talk about positioning items within CSS Grid. So here's my setup. I have a section wrapper container within that wrapper and 3 items, A, B, and C. Each item has an item class and an individual class for each individual item. Then I have a reset, my margins, a section wrapper, to just push it in from the edges. And then I have a container, which is using this new aspect ratio function to make a square. I have given it a border so I can see it. There's a 5 equal column and 5 equal row cells within that with a gap of 12 pixels. And then I put some colors around my items so I can see what's happening. So let's see all that in action. If I do start server, and then I'm going to do end. I'm going to grab this, go over to Firefox, paste it in there. There it is. And then over in Firefox, I'm going to right click, inspect, and turn on my grid so I can see what's happening. Okay, so there we go. 5 equal rows, 5 equal columns in a square. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is look at positioning elements within that grid. And the key to this is seeing where the columns and rows are. And that's what's really handy about this diagnostic tool here. If I turn on the grid, I can see where the numbers are. And if we notice, the number starts with 1 and ends with 6, and there's only 5 columns, but there's 6 positions, and that's because the leftmost position starts at 1, and then between the columns 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 at the end. So you only have 5 columns, but there's 6 positional spots. And the same is true of the rows. Okay, so to move things around, what we do is we define the row start, the column start, and the row end and the column end. So we say grid row start at 1, grid column start, grid column start that at 1, and then grid row end, make that 2, and grid column end, and also make that 2. And if we go back and look at our Firefox, refresh, nothing's happened. Because by default, each grid element, each item is going to take up 1 cell. That is its default behavior. So if I want it to take up more cells for the rows, I can make this bigger, right? And if I want to take up more cells for the columns, I can make that bigger. And if you notice, the other elements move to the next open cell. So if I make this 4, it goes, and it's just like how we read, left to right, top to bottom. If I say the column start is 2, then the blue item's going to go over here, right? The first available cell. Okay. So I can also use a shorthand to do the same thing, and we'll do that on 2. So for 2, item 2, we'll say grid row, and the first row is where we want it to start, so 4, and the second row with you have a / is where you want it to end, 6. Oh, I'm sorry. So it's 1. I'm looking at the rows here. My bad. 1 and 3, and then grid column. And this one will be 4 and 6. There's my 4 and 6. 4 start on 4, end on 6. Okay. We could also use a span to make this dynamic. So I could say grid row set to a span of 2. And I'll comment these out. And we could do the same thing with the grid column. And that looks the same, which is great. Turn my grid back on. But it is dynamic, right? So if I make my item 1 column wider, it's going to push this over to here, right? So all it says is like from wherever you can start, span 2. And sometimes we want that, right? But that's just good to be on the lookout for. So let's move that back. Move this, turn this back on. Okay. For item 3, this yellow one, we're going to use an even shorter shorthand. I'm going to make this a little smaller so you can see it all at once. And that shorthand is called grid area. So grid area. The first number is the row start. So we're going to start at 3. The next number is the column start, which is 1. Then the next number is the row end, which is 6. And the final number is the column end, which is also 6. And I'm forgetting the forward slashes here. There we go. This one's like a little bit more confusing because you have to keep track of what all these numbers are. Another handy shorthand is if you look in the bottom right corner here, you see this -1. So if instead of 6, we put -1 and -1 on that, that is the same, and what it means is fill any available spot. Okay, so the next thing I want to look at is overlapping elements and having things cross over on top of other things, which was really difficult to do in the past before CSS Grid was introduced. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make my item 1 go to the end column, which is -1. Okay, and now we see the blue is on top of the red. And we can position this however we like. So if I say 2 on that, and then we'll make this. So, and then this. Using my hotkeys now. And then this will pop down a little. See, we can have elements go right on top of other elements, which is really awesome. So we have a lot of control on how to position items within here. The last thing I want to do is talk about templated areas. So to do that, I'm going to simplify this a lot. So let's just get rid of that. Get rid of this. And we'll get rid of that. And then we're going to make our initial setup a little simpler too. So instead of 5, we'll make it 3. Instead of 5, we'll make it 2. And then we'll make our aspect ratio 3:2. Okay. So another really cool way to position stuff is to assign labels to the individual cells. To do that, we use grid template area. Grid template areas. Okay. And then how that works is we have open quote, open quote, and we'll say, put this on 2 different rows because it's a little easier to look at. Okay, so we're going to say apple, apple, orange, then lemon, lime, lime. And if you see over here, our grid has now added labels to our cells. So now, if I want my item 1 to take the apple cells, I say grid area apple. Pretty cool. And if I want my item 2, which is my yellow, here, let's make this item 2, let's make the item 2 orange, so this is like more easy to see here. There we go. And we say grid area orange. And then lemon's kind of working automatically, so let's make one more thing. Both spots. Make this item 4. Call that lime. Make it lime colored. Grid area lemon, grid area lime. Okay, very, very neat. Okay, so that's the basics of kind of populating cells with specific items in CSS Grid.